Welcome into our Backyard Brothers podcast. It's a Monday night, March 13th, the day before the NCAA tournament technically starts, although a lot of people don't count those first four as the tournament actually starting. But we have the first four starting tomorrow night. And so we're going to jump into a recording all about March Madness. For those of you wondering why we're not continuing part two of my show, all of our shows with the schedule of sports going on are going to be split. There's going to be a show between each of our shows, and so recording between each of our shows, and that's the case all the way through because we've got NBA playoffs coming up, we've got the NFL draft coming up, we've got NHL playoffs coming up, we've got Masters coming up, and so all of those things are kind of going to squeeze in between our shows, the parts of our shows. So we're going to start with a memory that I talked about last week. My memory relates to March Madness and college basketball, and so I thought that that'd be appropriate to kick off today. And my memory was really three separate Cinderella runs that I want to remember, and get your thoughts on those as well as any others that you remember. And so the three that I want to talk about are the two consecutive runs to the national championship by Butler in 2009-10 and 2010-11. And I think we'd have to qualify what a Cinderella team is, because Butler technically in that first year was a 5 seed. And 5 seeds going to the to the Final Four. I mean, they're not particularly common, but they're not that uncommon either, because 5 seed is pretty high. But Butler is a tiny school of about, I think it's less than 1,000 students in the school itself, and you don't expect a 5 seed necessarily to beat the overall number 1 seed, which is what happened that year. They beat Pittsburgh. I believe in the Sweet 16 round. Maybe that was the other year. Sometimes I get those two mixed up. But anyway, Butler crashed their way through the entire tournament until they met Duke, right? The big time Duke team for the national championship. And Gordon Hayward missed a half-court shot that hit the backboard and then the rim and then went off. If you all remember that, it was that close to Butler winning the national championship, backboard, rim, and off. And that was such an exciting game. And obviously, I think the entire country, except for a little place called Durham, North Carolina, were cheering for Butler to win that game. But and then they did it again the next year. They were an 8 seed the next year, and they made it all the way to the championship again. They beat Florida along the way. They beat I think that was the year they upset Pittsburgh actually in the second round. And then they go all the way to the end, and then they meet Kemba Walker and the UConn Huskies for the national title game, which was the worst title game I've ever seen. It was like a 47-45, horrible. No one shot well. Gordon Hayward was there again, I believe. I think he went to 2 straight with Butler there before he went to the NBA. And
Yes.
Couldn't pull off that upset. But how amazing is it? I mean, you see some schools go back-to-back national titles, but they're usually North Carolina, Duke, Kansas, the blue bloods of college basketball. You don't see Butler. Schools like Butler go to back-to-back national championship games. The other one I wanted to talk about is a true Cinderella. If you remember back in 2013, a tiny little school called Florida Gulf Coast. They were a 15 seed, and they upset Georgetown, the number 2 seed, in the first round, and they won easily. I think they won by 15 points in that game. And then the second round, I can't remember who they met, but they beat them by double digits as well, before going to the Sweet 16 and eventually bowing out to in-state rival Florida. But even though it was just 2 games, a 15 seed getting to the Sweet 16 is pretty incredible. And so that one sticks out of my mind because I was holding a tournament in my apartment, and my roommate, who knew nothing about college basketball and asked me, "What do these numbers mean?" He said, "I'm going to pick this weird school called Florida Gulf Coast." And he won the apartment thing because he picked Florida Gulf Coast to go all the way and won the whole thing. But that was fun. anyway, those are the couple of memories I wanted to talk about. You guys have any thoughts on those or other Cinderella moments?
I can
Um,
comment on Butler. You mentioned, teams going back to back. It is so rare for teams to go back to back, even teams like Kentucky, Kansas. It's Kansas has the opportunity to do it this year, right? With them being the 1 seed again.
Yeah.
But for Butler to go back to back was impressive. And you look at what came from that, right? Gordon Hayward became an NBA All-Star and is now a rotational player in the NBA and is well known. But Brad Stevens was the coach of Butler during that time. Brad Stevens, he was a couple of years later was hired by the Boston Celtics to be their head coach and took them to the NBA Finals. They lost there, but now he is the
President, isn't he?
GM of the
Yeah.
Celtics.
Yeah.
He's president, yeah, president. He's makes all the decisions. Can you imagine? This is what's on the table for a lot of these small schools. Is if you hit it big, a lot of big things can happen. An example. This is maybe not so grand in comparison, but a couple years ago when UMBC beat Virginia #1, that coach is now the head coach for Utah State.
Yeah.
He's got promotions up through, and now he's coaching another fairly large school. Things like that, and so it's amazing what can happen when a small team. Florida Gulf Coast, to comment briefly on that. That was a really fun team to watch because they had a lot of alley oops, a lot of
Yeah.
dunks. They brought a lot of excitement to that. Another one that I'd like to mention, another 15 seed just this past a year ago was St. Peter's that also made it to the Sweet 16. That was very fun to watch. And I'm looking at this and I'm excited to see who, if anyone, is going to be able to do that. Hopefully it is somebody. I remember maybe it's not so much of a Cinderella team, but a high seeded North Carolina was ranked 8 seed and made it to the national championship a couple years ago.
Yeah. I also think about who was the Loyola Chicago and Sister Jean made it to the Elite Eight a couple years ago. Yeah. So, Cody,
Yeah.
thoughts?
yeah. I was going to say that I think these Cinderella teams, these Butler teams, and these ones that we're talking about is at least the reason I love March Madness, and I'm sure it's the reason like pretty much why everyone else does. It's the possibility of insane upsets. It's a possibility of these no-name schools with these players who have big aspirations and big dreams to be able to make their name, make their mark, prove why they should, get a good spot in the draft or something, or whatever it is, or just, make their school known. It's a great opportunity for that, and it's really fun to watch that. I don't watch it because of Kansas, Duke, Kentucky, anything like that. I don't watch it because of that. I watch it because of these Loyola, Chicago, Butler. I don't even remember the name of the other one you said. And these schools, I watch it because of them, and seeing them be able to at least play well against a team like Gonzaga or Duke, if not beat them. And that's what's so exciting about it. And so, like I said, I think it was last week or 2 weeks ago, I've never been a huge fan of basketball. I love playing it, but March Madness is always something that I'm into. And I think it's because of these opportunities and these fun games to watch.
Yeah. Well, that leads straight into let me turn on a light. So, hold on. You're going to see my back for a second. Hey, look, let there be light. Um, that leads into this next great segment, which we're talking about who are this year's Cinderella teams. And the fun thing about it is you can't pick really. It's impossible to say this team is going to do it. You can look at all the stats, you can read everything about all these teams, and you can say, I think this team has a chance. But the thing, I mean, in a vacuum, right? You can say, yes, this team is good, but then you have to consider who they're playing, and like the great thing is of single elimination is Kentucky can blow it one game, right? They did a couple years ago too. And but so who are the Cinderella teams this year? Like, who would you pick as a Cinderella team? And I'm looking at this bracket right now, and there's a couple that would stand out. But do one of you want to go first and say, hey, I think this team has a chance to do it?
Like you said, it's really hard to choose, because it's so impossible to predict, which is what's so fun about it. To Cody's remarks, um, two teams that I do want to call out, Charleston. They are a 12 seed, and they play San Diego State. And this is a team. Charleston is a high-powered offensive team with also a great defense, right, in a small weak conference, going against San Diego State, which is a really, really strong defense. And it's just kind of one of those things where it's so hard to say. Is defense, a really tried and true defense, going to be able to win out there? That's something that I'm really actually looking forward to. And if Charleston can make it out of the first round, I think they could be our Cinderella team. Another one that I'd want to call out, I mentioned Utah State before. They could be a potential Cinderella team. And then another one that I would call out is Boise State.
Okay.
They're a 10 seed. They played Northwestern, which has not been in March Madness very often. And so Boise State, if they could get out of the first round, they would then face most likely UCLA, and that would be the big matchup. So those are some that I would call out.
Oh, I think for me, and mine will be short here, and I don't know why. I'm looking at this team, but 13 seed Kent State, first playing against Indiana. I don't know why, but I really have a good feeling about them this year, and I feel like they're going to upset Indiana in the first round, and that could lead on a rampage for them. And like I said, it's so hard. Like we said, it's so hard to choose and pick and choose, and same with this. I don't really know why, but it just kind of sticks out to me here.
What's funny about that is because one of the teams I was picking was Drake, who plays Indiana in that first round. I think Drake could be a Cinderella that goes on and I could see Drake winning a couple of games in that tournament. They're really well coached. I think they have a really powerful offense. I think they have a couple of scorers that score 20 plus points per game. They're tough. Indiana's a lot bigger, obviously, when you have a lot of huge stars, but watch out for Drake. And the other
Drake plays Miami.
oh
Drake plays Miami. Indiana plays Kane State.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
they're right next to each other on the
You're right.
bracket.
You're right. I was
if they
looking.
both win, they would play each other.
Yeah, that's true. Sorry. The other two that I wanted to mention, another Cinderella from years past was VCU, who went from the first four to the final four. I'm looking at VCU in this year as well. They're a 12 seed down in the West, and they got St. Mary's, and then if they win, they might get UConn. They can. I think they can win both of those games, and then they might face Kansas, which will be a little tougher. But I could see them going. The other one is a shot in the dark here. Colgate at number 15 over in the Midwest. They are the number one 3-point shooting team in the nation by percentage. They shoot a bunch. They shoot like 40 a game. It's incredible. I was reading about this team that shoots about twice as many 3-pointers as they shoot 2-pointers per game, and they make like 54% of them. This is a team that is on fire from three, and again, you can never really predict what happens. But if they get on a hot streak in a game, watch out, Texas. So that's one that I want to mention too. So,
And I was just going off of that real quick. You had mentioned VCU before that, and that of any of the teams that I might be rooting for this year, I might just go for VCU just because that's my locality, and so we'll see what happens.
great. Well,
It is interesting looking at those that you mentioned. Colgate, they are playing in Des Moines, and I believe they're fairly close there, within a few hours drive. I'm not sure exactly where they're located, but I think they're somewhat close there. So that's interesting.
yeah, Colgate's
and
in
then you mentioned.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I was mixed up.
Right.
But anyway, talking about, let's see, who did you mention? UConn.
VCU.
They would play, yeah, VCU and UConn, which they play in Albany, New York, which is only a few hours away from from where UConn is there in Hartford, Connecticut. And so that can end up being a home game essentially, which would make it more difficult to get out of that arena.
Yeah.
Yeah, Colgate, it's one of those, I absolutely agree. That could be one that could definitely be a good shocker.
Great. Well, let's jump from Cinderella to the other side. Who are the absolute favorites? The top, 1 to 4 seeds that we're saying, this team has a real chance of winning it all. And Cody, do you want to start that one, or should I jump in first? Okay.
Sorry. Yeah, I'll start that. I'm gonna go with the same team that I had chose last year to win it all, which obviously didn't, but they got really close. UCLA is a team that is always really good year after year, and they prove it every year. And this year they're a 2nd seed. I think last year they were a 4 seed. But last year I think they made it to the Final Four last year, didn't they? Or yeah. And I predicted they would go to the championship, win it all, but I I really see that they can pull off, a comeback and get through the Final Four this time and make it to the championship. So I think that out of the favorites, I would say UCLA has the best shot, in my opinion.
I love UCLA, and I think Mick Cronin is one of the best basketball coaches in the world. What he did at Cincinnati for a long time with his defense and getting them to where they were, taking UCLA's job and what he's done there. And they had a star last year that went to the NBA, and they have another star still. Is it Jaquez? Is he still there, or is he in the NBA? I'm trying to remember which one is which.
He was picked up. He was undrafted, but picked up by, I forget which team, but yeah, he's in the NBA. But
who's the other?
Yeah, there's a player there. I can't remember his name, but he's real big, fluffy hair.
Yeah. No, it is Jaime Jaquez. Yeah. The guy that went to the NBA was Johnny Juzang.
That was it, Juzang.
Yeah, Jaime Jaquez is the one he's so good. He's about 6'8", but athletic wing. I like that pick, Cody. I think I have them winning one of my brackets actually as well. So for me, I want to look at Purdue. Number 1 seed out in the East. They're also well coached by Matt Painter, but they have the best player in college basketball. His name is Tyler Eady. He's going to win the Naismith Award this year. And I remember maybe a month ago, Dustin, we talked about what's the name of the ridiculously tall high school prospect out in
Wembanyama.
Him. Tyler Eady is 7'4". And he's a big guy. He averages, I think, 24 points, 12 rebounds, and 3 blocks a game. This guy, I don't know if he's coming out to the NBA after this year. There hasn't been a lot of NBA draft stuff, so maybe he's not. But this guy is going to be a top 10 pick in the NBA as well. He is so good. He's going to, like I said, he's going to win the Naismith Award. And Purdue always goes after these huge guys. I think the Jazz drafted someone out of them who was about 7'2", 7'3" as well. But Tyler Eady has more than that guy had. Tyler Eady can shoot the 3. He can. It's impossible to block a 7'4" guy, and he's just really good down in the paint as well on both sides of the ball. I think Purdue has a good chance of making it really far.
Yeah, that's a great choice. I think that they're gonna be a Final Four team. I have quite a few teams that I'd like to mention, if that's okay. If there's anybody else that wants to talk a little bit more about other teams.
Go ahead.
Okay. First team I want to mention is number 1 overall, Alabama. They have 3 players that are probably going to be first-round draft picks, including Brandon Miller, who's really good. They, pardon the bad joke, but they're killing it this season.
Don't do that. They're just shooting so much from 3.
Yeah. Yeah, but I don't know if I could really call it adversity, but yeah, they've had players from the team arrested, charged with murder, right? And so that's where the bad joke comes in. But Yeah, it'd be. I think that they're going to go far, especially looking at the teams in their region. You know, who they'd go through in order to get far. They're one to that I'd expect to be Final Four. Um, Another one that I want to call out is Gonzaga. With Drew Timme, this might be the most experienced team in the field.
Yeah.
They've returned a lot of starters from previous years, especially Drew Timme. Probably the most tournament experience on any one team in the field, and I think that although they're a let's see, they're a 3 seed, they're 28-5. I think that they probably warrant a higher than a 3 seed, and could make it really far. And then last year's champion Kansas, they're a 1 seed again. They deserve that 1 seed. They're another one. There happens to be in the same region as Gonzaga, so those teams could meet up, and UCLA. Those 3 teams all together in the same region. That's a region with a lot of firepower in it.
Yeah. I do want to mention a couple of others, but not necessarily the top, 1 or 2 seeds. We've talked about the Cinderellas, we talked about the big ones. What about those ones that kind of hang around right in the middle? And I know I just said Purdue, but watch out for that second round matchup with Memphis. Memphis just beat Houston for the American Conference Championship. Houston was going to be the number 1 overall seed until they lost that game. Memphis is really good. So that second round matchup is going to be big between Purdue and Memphis, provided that Memphis gets by Florida Atlantic, but I think they will. A couple of other ones, Tennessee, probably the best defensive team in this field right now. They are so good defensively, and this is all over in the East, by the way. Like this is a tough bracket as well. I like Tennessee to go far, and then lastly, I would want to let's see, what was I lost my place. Texas A&M over in the Midwest as well. That is a really, really good team. I'm shocked they got a 7 seed. I thought they were going to be a top 4 seed, and they're as good as a top 4 seed. And in most of my brackets, I have them beating Texas in that second round. So I think that Texas can go far, or Texas A&M can go far as well. So.
I think there's just 2 more that I would want to mention, and I can promise you there are no biases in this at all. But Virginia and Arkansas, those 2 teams I'm interested in, and I can see a lot of good coming from those teams, and going pretty far. I'd be interested to see how they can do. But I've been hearing a lot of good things about Virginia, especially.
Yeah. Great.
Yeah, Virginia is one of those teams I agree with. It's interesting where I don't know which team is going to show up.
Yeah,
Arkansas I was gonna talk about Arkansas just to comment on that. You know, having watched a game or two since I live near Fayetteville where they're based, that Arkansas Illinois matchup. One of those teams is probably going to win by 30, and I have no idea which team it's going to be. But one of those teams is going to be a win in a total blowout, and I don't know which one. I think that you could choose one of those teams to win and be wrong, because it's just one of those you just have no idea which team's going to show up for either Arkansas or Illinois. Again, a team that I'd like to call it is Miami. They're a 5 seed in the Midwest. They'd have to go through Houston in order to win there. But I think that they're a strong, physical, athletic team that could do great. And I also don't want to discount over in the East, Kentucky. Right, they're a 6 seed, but it's Kentucky. We know that they have great leadership. They have not had a great season, but they have leadership experience, and if they can get out of that first round, that second round might be kind of easy too, because then they would play, Kansas State or Montana State, and then play, potentially have Marquette. We could see Kentucky make a run if they can kind of get the team together.
Okay, speaking of matchups, where do you see as this is a matchup that is must see TV, whether it's in the first round or later on, second round possibilities, Sweet 16 possibilities. I've already mentioned a Purdue Memphis showdown in the second round. I think is better than a normal 1-8 would be. A couple others that I would want to point out, just in like looking at the Sweet 16, Baylor and Arizona. That's a great one to look at too, provided they both make it that far. And another one in this first round that I think is going to be really a good matchup: St. Mary's and VCU. That first round, St. Mary's is a really good team. I've watched a few of their games. They're in the West Coast Conference. VCU is a good team. I think that can be a really that one might end up in the final score in the 30s. Just because, not because they're both bad, but because they're both two of the slowest paced teams in the country and two of the best defensive teams in the country. You could see like a 40-37 final, and it's probably not going to be that ridiculous, but that's the point I'm trying to make there is how, if you like good defensive basketball, that's the game to watch. So any other matchups from you two?
Yeah, I'll just go real quick. Just one real quick that I'm looking at. If it aligns up right and perfectly, I think a Texas A&M and Xavier game would be really cool and really fun to watch. I think that's, I think Xavier's a 3 seed and Texas A&M is disguised as a 7 seed team. And I think that's going to be must see TV, of course, if it ends up that way, which I think it will, but we'll see.
Yeah, a couple matchups that I'd want to say is out in the East, Michigan State and USC.
Yeah.
These are two powerhouse games meeting in the first round. I think that could be powerful, especially with the winner going on to play what will most likely be Marquette. And if they get through Marquette, the road to the Final Four is fairly open until they hit what is most likely Purdue.
Yeah.
That could be interesting there. I mentioned Charleston and San Diego State. I think that's a really neat matchup. Let's see here. TCU over in the West, they play the winner of Arizona State or Nevada. That's another, feels like a big matchup there, depending on who wins that. TCU had a really good run, I think, a year ago.
Yeah.
And that they're going to be an interesting team to watch, especially in that first round matchup.
Watch out for that UCLA Gonzaga Sweet 16 too. That should be fun if those two teams make it. Okay. So lastly, I think we want to talk about Final Four predictions, and I'm trying to think the best way to do this. Maybe we take each quadrant and we say, who do we think's coming out of there, and just match them up. So, like, for example, up in the top left, the South, my pick is not Bama. My pick is Arizona coming out of that. So, what about you two? We can write this down, but it may be the same. We don't have to pick different, obviously. So, but
it's definitely Alabama for me. They're a powerful team. They have several players that are NBA ready. I think Alabama makes it to the Final Four.
Cody,
Just to kind of throw a wrench in there, I can see Virginia being in that one. Yep, and I said it.
Okay, let's go down to the East. I am going to take top seed Purdue out of that bracket. Yeah, I know what you were doing there, Dustin. But I'm taking
again.
Purdue.
We're flipping here. You go tops for the last one. You went 2, I went 1. You went 1. I'm going 2 with Marquette out of there.
And
Cody?
for me here, I'm actually just I'm gonna agree with you, Scott, on that one. I think it's gonna be Purdue.
Okay. Let's go top right. Over.
And Scott, you mentioned Tennessee. I just want to call that out again. Tennessee, that they could be the sleeper there
They
for the
could
4
be.
seed.
Yeah. Yeah, they definitely could be. I agree. Top right, Midwest. This is a tough one for me. I have several possibilities, but it's hard for me to pick against top seed Houston in this one. So I'm going to take Houston.
I'm sticking with one of the teams I said to watch out for in Miami. I think they'll have a Sweet 16 matchup with Houston if they can get to that far, and I think that's something Miami could win. So I'm going to go Miami.
That one's really hard for me. I'm gonna say I'm just gonna go Texas. Number 2, Texas.
Okay. And then out in the West, this is also a tough one. We've talked about 3 really, really good teams out of the West here. But I don't know, Cody, if you're going to pick this way because you mentioned it earlier, but I'm going UCLA.
That's exactly what I was gonna say. So
I'm going Kansas. I think that they're such a strong team and likely to repeat. So I'm going Kansas.
Okay. So Dustin, you went 1, 2, 5, right? 5. Yeah. 5, 1.
Yeah.
I have 2, 1, 1, 2. And Cody has 4, 1, 2, 2. So, all right. So now let's talk about, we got 5 minutes. We're fine. Okay. So national championship game predictions. Who wins for me between Arizona and Purdue? Wow. I think I'm taking Purdue. Dustin, Alabama and Marquette.
I'm going to say Alabama there.
And Cody, Virginia and Purdue.
Purdue.
Okay. For me, I got Houston and UCLA. I have to go UCLA on that one. Dustin, Miami and Kansas.
Kansas is going back.
And Cody, Texas and UCLA.
That's UCLA.
Okay. For me, between Purdue and UCLA, I'm taking the Bruins, UCLA. Dustin, Bama and Kansas.
Kansas. They're going to repeat back-to-back champions.
Okay. And Cody, Purdue and UCLA, same as me.
I'm gonna say that's a Purdue win.
Okay. Great. And I don't know, Dustin, if we're just going to create one bracket that we follow this, and it may be different, or if you want, or if we can enter several different ones. But what do y'all think? Should we just have one master bracket each for this one?
Yeah, and I think that as with most people, our opinions are going to change.
Yeah.
Who knows how many times over the next few days? And so, if the brackets that we submit as part of this podcast are different than what we talked about, that's totally fine.
Yeah.
We'll get there. We'll have official brackets by Wednesday night or Thursday morning when things start.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, so much can change just in the next 24 hours even, and what our thoughts are and what we think could happen.
Yeah. Well, we got 3 minutes for any parting thoughts about the field. I mean, obviously, we could sit here for 4 hours and talk about all these things, but any last things that we want to mention about this field or the NCAA tournament in general, or coaches or players or anything like that? Justin, Cody.
This is just exciting.
I agree.
I mean, it's exciting. It's Cody. I think you had a perfect comment where even someone who doesn't necessarily like basketball or follow it, and then neither of us three are necessarily huge college basketball followers in any way, but we know what an upset is. We know the teams that are the big dogs that we want to see go down, and that's just so exciting to see it happen. And so there's a thrill in the air. It's exciting.
Yeah. My thought is just let's get to it. I'm excited to see what chaos will happen, and I feel like that's the one constant every year in March Madness. As in the name it bears, March Madness is there's always going to be chaos.
I 100% agree. And yeah, a lot of different things can happen, and it's impossible to predict, which makes it maybe the best time in sports. So sometimes, as fun as they are, the NBA playoffs can sometimes get well, we know what's going to happen. It's going to end up being this team versus this team, right? I mean, for 4 years in a row, we knew it was going to be the Warriors versus the Cavaliers, right? And so that's what happens when you get into a series where you have to win 4 games. Is the best 2 teams end up going to the finals, and the best team usually wins. So, not always the case with March Madness. You get really hot, you can win it all. So
yeah, I was just gonna say it's always super exciting to make a bracket with the tiny sliver of hope that you're gonna win that $1 billion. So
yeah, every year it's like, this is the perfect bracket. Yeah. So we'll leave you with that, and we'll be in touch and see what happens. Until next week, then.